chat if anybody would like to follow or look at some events. So I will welcome you all. Thank you all for joining us at today's Emerging Technologies Consortium hosted by the Mount Royal University Library. The Mount Royal University Library is situated on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, which includes the Siksika, the Kainai, and the Piikani, the Tsuut'ina and the Îyârhe Nakoda nations, the Métis Nation Region 3, and all of the people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta. We make this land acknowledgement in the spirit of reconciliation. Thank you. I will hand this over to Anna, who will introduce today's guest and speaker. Thank you.
Perfect. And forgive me, I'm going to be multitasking as I'm speaking because I'm admitting people into the meeting at the same time. So if I just kind of awkwardly trail off for a minute, don't be alarmed. But thank you all for joining us today. We are so excited to have Tony Chaston here. He's an associate professor at Mount Royal University in the psychology department, and he is going to be sharing with us social virtual reality platforms as a tool for teaching and learning. So a little bit about Tony's talk today. So over the past year, he's been developing a course that's a brand new course for the Department of Psychology called The Digital Frontier, Perception, Virtual Reality, and AI in Psychology. And it's going to be taught entirely using virtual reality and using the AltspaceVR platform. So during the presentation, Tony is going to be discussing the opportunities and challenges associated with developing and teaching in VR, and specifically how to develop and build the learning spaces, how to manage a VR learning environment, and what it is actually like to teach in virtual reality. He's also going to discuss leveraging the opportunities of a VR learning space for non-VR teaching. So thank you all, and please join me in welcoming Tony.
Hi all, thank you. Everybody can hear me fine?
Hi, Tony.
I hope. Just get my presentation up and running here, if you just give me half a second. Oh, wait, I presented the wrong thing. Sorry, just give me a second. We'll get there eventually. Window. And does that work for everyone? Is that presentation up properly?
Yes, it is. You're good
Perfect.
to go.
Thank you. Okay, so welcome today, guys, to everybody that's here. I'm going to talk to you today about, as Anna just talked about, the talk is called Social Virtual Reality Platforms as a Tool for Teaching and Learning. And I'm really just going to walk you through, to be honest with you, what's kind of happened with me since COVID started. And I was on sabbatical when COVID started, and I was basically going to use my sabbatical to work on a bunch of research things and prepare for this course that we've been sort of talking about. And then once COVID hit, it kind of changed everything. A lot of the research projects that I was working on simply became undoable. They involve, having a person alone in a room with a VR headset working, in today's world, that's not really very practical. And so I shifted gears. And when I think most faculty were shifting gears to turning their courses online, I took the spring and the summer to turn the research online along with preparing for this course. And so I'm just going to kind of walk you through some of the things that I've learned and experienced over the last sort of 8 months or so with regards to presenting and teaching and learning in virtual reality. So as Anna mentioned, I'm developing this new course. It's called The Digital Frontier, Perception, Virtual Reality, and AI in Psychology. I can let you know where we're at on that. The course is moving through the approval process right now and is on the docket to be approved on Friday at Friday's Arts Faculty Council meeting. So until then, it's not an actual course yet, or until all the stages of approval, but we're working towards the idea of teaching it in September in next fall. So that'll be the first live version of this course that goes. So, and then the other things I'm going to talk about, as Anna sort of mentioned, talking about social virtual reality platforms. what's out there, a little bit about designing and building VR teaching and learning spaces. How do you do that? Sort of both practically what software can you build them and how can you do it? And also kind of design elements, what goes into a good design space for teaching in VR. And then a little bit about teaching and group management. So how do you actually manage a group of people in a learning space in VR? So that's what we're going to talk about today. Okay, so this is really just a graphic of that course itself. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. There's a lot of small text in there that you don't have to worry too much about. I just wanted to give you a sense of what the course was about, just so you could frame that up in your head as we go through. So if you just look at basically the yellow ovals at the top, they give you the basic chapter topics that I'm going to be covering in the course. And so, we're going to start with some perception review. We're going to talk about artificial intelligence, narrow AI, and general artificial intelligence. And those are really always from the spin of perception. So I'm a perceptual psychologist. I work in visual perception. That's what my career has been. Perception of spaces specifically. So a lot of my career was spent in studying outdoor spaces, nature spaces, things like that. And now obviously I've moved to studying VR spaces. So we're going to talk about all of this in the context of perceptual psychology. How do we perceive an AI? How do we interact with an AI? Those types of things. So we're going to be spinning it from that perspective. So there's the topics there. As we move to chapter 4, we're moving on to a concept called transhumanism. Again, I'm not going to get into these because this is not really what this talk is about. And then we move into some of the stuff that's a little more specifically related to my background, which is social interaction in virtual spaces, space perception, and then the last chapter, feeling presence, that sense of being present in a virtual environment. How do we achieve that? And then nature perception in virtual reality. That's my research area right now, which is sort of using virtual reality environments, nature scenes in virtual reality environments to look if we can use them for stress reduction as a therapeutic technique. So that's some of the research that I'm doing. I won't really talk much about the research today, a little bit, but okay. So that's the course. And that's just to give you an overview of that's kind of what this new psychology course is going to be about. So let's move on to how it's delivered, the platform. That's really what we're focusing on here today, and that's what's unique about this course. So with my background in VR, I quickly started to see, I've been doing VR research for maybe 5-6 years now, and I started to see its potential from a teaching and learning perspective. It started to become pretty clear. And so I started to explore these platforms, ultimately leading to this idea of doing this course. So I just want to start off with a little bit about what social virtual reality platforms actually are and what ones are out there and what ones are being used. So in a broad sense, you can talk about a social virtual reality platform as a digital space where users can meet and interact as avatars. And really the take home with understanding the way these work is the platform is basically, it provides you with avatars. It provides you with sort of structure and how those avatars can interact. But these platforms actually have virtually no content in that it's entirely up to the users to create worlds and have events. And there's nothing happening in these spaces without the users, right? They sort of are just these blank slates that we can then go into and control and use how we like. So that's the gist of what we mean by a social virtual reality platform. This one's kind of an interesting picture. There's a few things I just want to touch on. And so if you actually look at the image that's in this slide, on the right side on the screen, you can see it says educators in, that actually fills in to say educators in VR, which is a group I'm going to talk about a little bit later. I'm involved with that group. So this is a large international group now called Educators in VR that promotes the use of virtual reality technologies for education. Another thing to take note is notice that was the 2020 International Summit Conference that was held back in last February. And a few more things to take note of. On the far wall, you can see a sign that says Engage. That's actually a different platform. This picture was taken in Altspace, which is a platform I'll talk about in a moment. Engage is another platform. The reason both logos are up here is because this event actually crossed over multiple platforms. And the very last thing I want to share with you guys that's kind of fun is if you look at this picture, you probably wonder what they're all doing. There's like this blue orb floating in the middle of the space, and there's all these lines going out from the orb to the people. And what that is that's actually a teleporter. So for those of you who are familiar with Altspace, the way this works is a person can spawn a teleporter like that. The rest of us can click on it. And then when they everyone's in, they can advance the teleporter and the whole group can teleport from one space to a different space. It's the way to move as a group in Altspace. So that's what's actually going on in that picture. Anyway, so as I said, the two main platforms that seem to be used for educational purposes right now are Engage and Altspace. There are a number of other platforms out there. Most of them aren't developed enough to be, kind of practical and functional for like education, actually running classes and all of the things that go along with needing to do that, both managing the space and presenting content and managing the people. You need a platform that has all the tools in place to allow you to do that as a teacher. So Engage and Altspace are the two main platforms, and I'll talk about each one of those in a moment. And then just on the right, that's VisWig. So that's me. So VisWig is my Altspace avatar, and that's what he looks like. And of course, I have a headshot of him because I'm a VR nerd, and this is what VR nerds do. So that's my avatar there. He'll show up in a few shots throughout the presentation. So let's look at those two platforms in a little more detail. Engage it's got some pros. It's got some nice features to it. It looks a little more professional. It's a little more, they're trying to go towards a more photorealistic kind of virtual world. So you can see the figure there. That's a place that you could create, and then you could have a meeting there. So each one of those 4 individuals is a live avatar that is a person behind a headset, and they can talk and meet and interact. And that's what we're trying to create for obviously a teaching environment. So you can create nice professional environments and Engage. They also have a feature that's really handy called a whiteboard, which is literally what you think it is. It's a whiteboard with like pens that you can pick up and you can write on the whiteboard, and then you can take pictures of that or save that image. So it's a way to take notes in VR, which sounds like not that big a deal, but that's actually one of the biggest challenges right now, is taking notes, writing things down, documenting things that are going on in VR while you're in it. But that's a developing technology. So those are some of the pros of Engage. The cons of Engage is cost and number of users in the space. So on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see of my image, you can see a presentation that was a screenshot from a presentation that was done in Engage, and that is Neil deGrasse Tyson behind the Neil deGrasse Tyson looking avatar at the front. So that was a presentation that he did in Engage. In terms of the cost, it's $50, €50. So that works out right now to $77.57 as of yesterday in Canadian dollars. And that's an annual subscription. The way Engage would work is every person would have to have a subscription. And in fact, if you're using it at a university like we would be, I really should be purchasing the enterprise version, which it's hard to even know how much it costs. They don't list any price. They just say, contact us. And I've talked to a few people, it's in the thousands of dollars range. So that's the idea of a full enterprise version where we buy a license as Mount Royal and the students are part of that package, right? Realistically, in today's market, it would be hard to find money, I think, to sustain that every year. The course would then become dependent on whether I could find budget, which I didn't really like that. And I also am trying to get into a situation where my students don't have a big cost. Also, there's restrictions around the number of users. So the pro version of Engage, which there's a light version, but that's really just a demo. The pro version, you can have up to 30 people in the digital space, but only 8 of them can be using the light version. If you buy the enterprise version, you can have up to 50 people in the space, but only 20 can have the pro version. The other 30 have to be part of your enterprise. So again, it's a little more restrictive and a little more controlled in terms of Engage. You'll see when we move to Altspace, we've got a lot more freedom. So talking of Altspace then, so AltspaceVR is the other platform. This is the one that I've chosen to go with. Some of the pros, it has better event hosting tools. So if you're actually in an event to manage the people and the room and all of that stuff, it's a lot easier in Altspace. Altspace is also free, which is great. It's cross-platform, which is great. It supports all kinds of different headsets. The idea being if you have a headset, it should work in Altspace. Which creates a little bit of downside on world customization, but you can customize the worlds. You just have to sort of meet the lowest common denominator. Sort of the lowest approved headset has to work in your world. But the customization of worlds is really important, and it's a flexibility that you have much more in Altspace than you do in a platform like Engage. Also, the number of users is dependent on the space itself. So most of the spaces in Altspace will be between 30 to 50 users, and you can have up to 70 users in some of the spaces that we've been using. Okay, Altspace then. Downsides of Altspace, it is a little cartoonish. One of the ways that the way you manage this is obviously it's about demands on the user's headset. So, the frame rates have to be able to stay up. The download itself of the virtual environment has to be nice and small. So you're not, you can't have these environments that are hundreds of megabytes that someone's got to download to their headset. So they all have to be kept quite small. Some of the most recent worlds I've been working on are as small as under 10 megabytes for the entire world. So it's a very small, quick download for the user. Okay, so Altspace worlds are a little cartoonish, and we're trying to move beyond that. You'll see in these pictures that there's different types of avatars. There's the old avatars and there's the new ones. The new ones are much better. They're still cartoony, but they're more customizable, and they're based just on humans. So there's no robots, there's no dragons or anything. It's just humans, and you can customize quite a lot now. So the avatars have gotten better, and the spaces will be following. Altspace also has no whiteboard feature in Altspace that you can use yet. I hear they're working on it from what I've heard. There's a prototype behind the scenes, but hopefully that'll come out soon. Okay, so those are sort of the two main platforms, Engage and Altspace. For a bunch of reasons, I chose Altspace. Primarily, it's free. It can support the number of people in a room that I want. Some of the other platforms are small, like can only support like 8 people or something like that. And so those are two of the main reasons. And the third one that I haven't really talked about is that Altspace actually is a really positive space. It seems like a very inclusive and positive space so far. And that's important when you're inviting students into that space. Granted, they'll be coming into private events for a classroom, but they'll inevitably find themselves into the public parts of Altspace as well. And so you want to make sure that you're hosting your course in a platform that you're not embarrassed about, that is a positive platform. So, so there's that. These presentations are weird. Hey, like no feedback from anyone. I'm assuming you're all out there listening.
Tony, we've got some questions in the chat. I don't know if you want to take a pause now to answer some questions, or if you'd like me to pose them at the end.
I can take them now for sure. If we can, I'll try and answer a few. If they're longer ones, I would pass them on to the end, but sure. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So, Kathy, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can, yeah.
So my question is just, so you've narrowed it down to Altspace and Engage. And are these, so I'm assuming your focus when you were evaluating these was post-secondary education, but are these in K-12 education?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, you're right, absolutely. So yes, I was evaluating for a platform for teaching this specific post-secondary course. That being said, that group that I mentioned, Educators in VR, works with junior high, high school, and so forth. K-12 is a little bit of a weird phrase in that officially, VR headsets shouldn't be used by people under 13. That's the safety warnings that are on most of the headsets. Now, that being said, I was just in a presentation Monday where they were presenting research all the way from kids from 3 years old to 18 using headsets, and the average age of the people in the group was 10. So I don't quite know how they're doing that work ethically, but so there's a lot of mix on that right now. So anyway, that's just something to think about. But this platform, Altspace, would probably be the best one. It's the one that most people are using for junior high, high school type teaching as well. So teachers that are in those environments.
Yeah, I asked that question before you kind of got to the pros and cons, and I'm thinking with the across headsets that Altspace works really well, probably would fit the bill for grade school. Thank you.
Yeah, one other thing that's really nice about Altspace is it has an excellent 2D interface as well. So let's say you're in class and your headset dies for whatever reason. You can log in just using a flat screen computer, and you're still in the 3D interface with all the rest of your students. You can talk to them and so forth, but you're just watching it on a flat screen TV, sort of like playing a video game on a flat screen TV. It has that look to it. So that's another benefit to Altspace, is having that robust 2D interface as well.
Great, thanks for that.
No worries.
Tony, we've got 2 more questions. Chris, would you like to ask your question?
I can. I don't know if it's better suited for the end, though, since it's a very broad question, but it has to do with its comparison and its educational use at, like Second Life, and how Second Life was to revolutionize educational teaching and learning. And so I'm just curious, is this similar in that respect and only going to be effective in more isolated and specific instances?
No, this is, the world's moved on. Second Life was interesting and a fun experiment, but it was never very practical in terms of a teaching and learning educational format. Whereas you'll see, and later in this talk, that there is a lot of content in Altspace already designed specifically for hosting events and all of that. I'll be getting to that shortly.
Thank you.
If you're going to get to the next question too, but Caroline is asking about headsets and your favorites. Right.
So for me, I'm gonna say I love the Quest 2. So I have a Quest and a Quest 2. They are fantastic. Doing education with a cordless headset is super functional. And with regards to Altspace, because Altspace and most of these platforms will work to a lowest common denominator, those headsets will work great. You don't need the power of a big computer-based corded headset for any of this kind of stuff that we're talking about today. It's all designed to work on the smallest, simplest headsets. So ones that are just a couple $100 will work. But the Quest and the Quest 2 are by far the best devices. The only caveat I'll put on that is that now you're starting to have to log in with Facebook accounts, which is starting to create some behind the scenes distress for a lot of people, but that's a whole other side matter. So yes, I hope that addresses your headset question.
Does that answer your question, Caroline?
Hopefully.
She said yes.
Excellent.
So we have the questions right now, Tony. Thanks. If anybody's got more questions, feel free to pop them into the chat.
Okay, I'm going to jump through now a bunch of stuff about Altspace specifically and about world building in Altspace. That's what we're going to move to. So one of the other things I said I would talk about today is this idea of designing and building VR learning spaces. So I've had the opportunity now to both be a student in virtual reality courses as well as a teacher. And that's, been insightful. And through that, I've started to learn what spaces are needed. I've been trying to develop spaces for my new course. And so I've been experimenting, trying different spaces. So I want to just share with you a little bit about what I've learned from that. So there's basically 3 ways to create a learning space in Altspace. You can use a pre-built Altspace template. So they have a bunch of them just kind of ready to go. You just activate them and use them. Super simple. If you want more customization, you can build your own using the Altspace World Builder, which is sort of software they have that allows you to build your own spaces. And then if you want to take it to the next level, you can build in a external program called Unity, which is a gaming engine, and you can import that into Altspace. So let me just briefly show you what those are like. So this is an example. The picture on the right is an example of one of the pre-built meeting spaces. So this is a space where people can kind of meet and hang out. There's a little table there. There's a screen at the far end. That screen you could bring up basically anything that's has a web link. So you can bring up a browser there, and then in that browser you can put anything like a web link. So I can use slides.com presentations. That's how I do like a slideshow, is I use slides.com. And then I just put the link in. And then embedded in that, I can then have YouTube videos and links to other content online. Individual links, things like that can be put in. Again, the browser's getting better all the time, the functionality in it. And on the lower left, what you can see is I just included a little picture that shows you some of the templates that are available to set up. So they have movie theaters, they have presentation rooms, they have meeting rooms. You can see they even have some things that are a little fun, like a basketball court with real working basketballs that you can shoot hoops. It's kind of fun. So anyway, that's how you'd use the pre-built templates. And again, not the technical parts, but that's basically the gist of what it kind of looks like. The next alternative is to use the Altspace World Builder. So in the upper right, what you see there is a world that I built using the Altspace World Builder. There's a screen that I kind of have fun hanging by ropes from trees, and a little stage and some rocks. And you'll see most of the things that I'm building, because I come from this outdoor nature therapy background and outdoor nature perception background. I build all these outdoor amphitheater style learning spaces. That's sort of what I'm interested in. But you don't have to. That just is my personal choice. And then on the left side of that slide, you can see the world builder interface. So when you're in the world, it just appears as a window floating in front of you that you can open and close. And it's basically like a mouse system, right? Where you can see the person's hand there. And if you look where it says kits, there's a little green arrow. That's basically like the controller in your hand works like a laser pointer, and you just click on the things you want, and basically works like a mouse. And then you can, move that menu closer or further away, and you can move it around and use that menu to build your world, basically. And then you grab objects in the world and you move them to where you want. So it's very hands-on, very tactile. To be honest with you, it's a ton of fun. And for me personally, it's almost therapeutic. Like after a stressful day, I just go world building a little bit. It's kind of fun and relaxing. Honestly, that sounds weird, but it's true. Okay, so the third way to build a world for Altspace is to use Unity. So Unity is a gaming engine. So many of the video games that you would go to the store and see on the shelves, they were made in Unity. So it's a gaming engine. I don't need games, I just need worlds. So if you think about a video game, it's got to have a world built first, and then you've got characters that do things in that world. Well, I just use Unity for the world building part. So I use it to build the virtual worlds. And then Altspace itself was actually built in Unity in the first place. And so they interface really nicely. So there's a simple plugin in Unity that allows me to access my Altspace account while I'm using my Unity software and create templates and upload to templates and all of that kind of stuff to share between Unity and Altspace. So that's pretty seamless. Many of you are probably looking at that screen going, oh my God, there's a lot of menus and things that you could click on and features. And yeah, so Unity is not super simple to learn, but it's actually a little easier than you think. And I only started learning it last spring. And it's another one of these software programs that, once you know how to use a little bit of it, it's kind of like you can do a lot with a little bit. Obviously, I only know a small portion of the software, the parts that I use. So I only started learning this in the spring, and I actually learned it in Altspace. I was a student in a course in a couple of courses actually that I took in Altspace over the spring and summer. So this next image here is me actually, the upper right is me receiving my graduation certificate we actually had like a whole graduation ceremony. We walked across the stage, and Nicholas, who runs the courses, handed us our certificates, and we were awarded. He even made these little hats that we all had for the day that we could wear, graduation hats. It was really fun. It was a great experience. So you can see that was Introduction to Unity. That was the first course I took back in the spring, and then I took a course called World Building from Universe as well. Universe is just the name of Nicholas's online school. He calls it Computer Science and Virtual Reality, CS and VR, and you can find them in Altspace doing events every Saturday, kind of encouraging people to come to their classes. And they also have a website. I think it's called tryuniverse.com. And so I took a couple of courses, and that's how I learned. The picture in the lower left, just for fun, is that's our graduating class on graduation day, all standing on the stage and releasing emojis, which we'll talk about in a minute. So the thing about Unity is it's a little bit of a learning curve, obviously, to get up to speed on it, but the upside is you can create much more detailed environments. So this set of environments right here were built in Unity. This is a world that I call the virtual garden, and this is actually for a research project that I'm working on. So the idea here is that people will walk down the path that you can see in the one picture and end up in the garden that you can see a little bit of in the other picture, and they can spend some time in there. And this is the part of the research project I'm doing to look at VR nature therapy. So could spending 10 minutes in this environment and walking around and listening to the sounds and seeing the flowers, could it be used for stress reduction as a therapeutic technique? So that's a sort of a different thing than what we're talking about mostly here, but just to show you some of the worlds that were created in Unity for that project. So other worlds that I've been creating in Unity are prototypes for the course that I was talking about, so my virtual reality course. And these are some pictures from one of the worlds that I've been working on that I'm calling the Lawson Lake Amphitheater, simply because if you look at the picture on the right, the lake in the distance there is called Lawson Lake. So these, the way I'm making these, they're a little unique. So what I'm doing is I'm building a virtual digital space, and then what we call the skybox, the kind of part that is the scene that's all around, is taken from a 360 photo. Actually, it's a screenshot from a 360 video that I shot last summer. And so I shoot these videos, and then I build virtual worlds in those spaces. So I'm kind of creating almost a bit of an AR experience where you've got like realistic world kind of blended with digital world a little bit. So anyway, and you can see I've been playing around perceptually. The picture on the right, I'm trying to get the idea of the ground that's digital flowing fairly seamlessly into the part of the picture, the actual picture in the background. And then obviously it's got an outdoor amphitheater. The picture on the left there shows the stage and kind of the start of the amphitheater area where people would watch a performance of some type. So that's that's a prototype environment I've been building for my class. The idea here, I just want to touch one more thing. The idea here is not simply to build a classroom. It became pretty apparent that that was pointless. It's too simple. Like there's so much more you can do with it. So my classroom for my upcoming course is going to be sort of an amphitheater stage area. There'll be buildings, there'll be parks, there'll be trails, and you'll create a whole world that is persistent throughout the whole semester. So students could come into it at any time. It's private. Only the students will be allowed access to it, but it'll be persistent. So they can come and have their own group meetings for research projects. We'll put all the content up and have it in places that they can see it all. So that's the idea of the learning space, is it's more than just simply a classroom. It's a learning space. Another one of those that I've built recently is this one. Shows a couple of images. Again, the theme is basically the same. This one's called the Maud Lake Pavilion. And this one is actually for that group educators in VR that I'm working with, actually a subgroup called VR researchers, or researchers in VR. And this is actually going to be our new event space. So what you see here is where we will, hopefully starting in January, all of our live research events will occur in this place. This will be our default space. So we'll be able to host other people's events there. We'll be able to have our talks and presentations there. And so that's what I'm doing, is helping build a new space for our group. So I'm just going to briefly tell you about those, because they're it's a really relevant group. The broader group is called Educators in VR, and Laurel Fossen is a lady who kind of runs it. She goes by Rel in Altspace, and there's her and a big group of people now. It's basically a group of educators, everything from K to 12 to post-secondary, who and private industry as well, like teachers who teach sessions for corporate, things like that. So Educators in VR promotes the use of VR in that. And they're really an excellent group. They run all kinds of free events in Altspace for training and orientation, and fantastic. And Rel, who runs it, she's just fantastic. It became so popular that she broke it off into subgroups. So a group was started called VR researchers, or researchers in VR. And this is people more focusing on doing research in virtual reality. Originally, it was all like researchers in sort of SOTL, because it was tied with educators in VR. So it was like the scholarship of teaching and learning style research, but it's actually bubbled out over that to just being general VR research. And we do discussion and workshops. So we have events bi-weekly is what we've been doing. Every other week on Mondays, we have a live international event where anywhere from usually 30 to 60 people, sometimes more, from around the world log in, and we have research and discussion workshops every other week. The popularity is such that we're actually going to move those to every week starting in January. I'll be hosting one. The lady in the middle with the pink hair is Evelyn, not Evelyn Field from Mount Royal, but Evelyn, who is a grad student who works in the Netherlands at a university there, and she runs this group. And she's our team lead, and she's fantastic. And so that's what this group is doing, is we're basically having these events, and we're going to start having them every week. We have guest speakers. So it's pretty cool. It's almost like a little mini international research conference happening every week or two, and we get to be part of it. I just thought I'd throw up our mission statement. So Researchers in VR is an online XR community that supports academic researchers and industry professionals by hosting AltspaceVR events to encourage knowledge sharing, collaboration, discussion, and assisting in research activities, participant recruitment, and data collection. So that's basically what we do with that group. And it's a really fun group. So please promote this, share it with everyone. We'd really like to, the group is growing all the time. I did a presentation for them some while ago. This is a research presentation that I did as one of the sort of guest speakers, even though I'm normally a host and a moderator for these events. But I did a research presentation there. So this is just a screenshot from YouTube, because the video was recorded and posted to YouTube, the presentation. So it's on there. So this was using 360 nature videos to lower stress. So I was talking about my research. Okay, so shifting gears a little bit. let's talk about those spaces then in a little bit more detail. What are the critical design elements that I think need to go into a space for teaching in VR? You still need some kind of screen and stage area typically. People are just at this point still familiar with that, and so it works. And it's just a way to communicate it works. Let's just say it works, but you don't want to do only that in VR. There's a lot more, you're not leveraging the benefits of VR if you're just copying what you do in a regular classroom just in VR. You need open display areas for displaying class projects. Typically, you're going to want some place to people to put up posters and put up things that they've created. You also need a bigger, more open area for models and demos and papers. Like I envision a scenario when I'm teaching that maybe we meet at the amphitheater for a little bit, and then after a 10-minute little presentation, they go off and there's articles posted up in the virtual space that they can read, and they can have discussion groups, and then we can meet as a group, and then we can come back and have more conversation. And then when they go back out into the teaching world, maybe there's different articles now up and available for them to read. These kinds of things, and they can work on group projects and they can move around. And because of that, you also need places for people to have breakout conversations, places where people can go and chat with each other in small groups, work on group projects and things like that. This is really actually kind of cool because you can do this so well. We always talk about in the university class, how in the real live university class, how cool it would be, like, have everybody just go outside and sit in the sun out in the park, outside on the campus somewhere and have conversations that way, like this idea. But in practice, it's really hard to do in a university. Everybody's got their book bags and their computers, and everyone's got to pile everything up, and you got to go out. It's actually very impractical. But in VR, it's really practical because you just move your avatar. There's no baggage. It's easy. And so it works really well to have a conversation collectively and then spread out and have group work. So you want to leverage that in VR for sure. Space is not too big, not too small. Obviously, you don't want a huge space where people can get lost in it, or it takes too long for people to get back to the main area if you call everyone back, something like that. But you also don't want it so small that people are crowding into each other. If you're having a conversation with, say, 6 people standing in a circle, and just over to your side, there's another 6 people, well, you can hear what they're saying, and it's harder to filter out in VR, and it just becomes a lot of voices. So you need enough space that groups can spread out enough that they're not sort of overlapping each other with their sound, with their speaking. And people just like to have cool areas to go and hang out, right? So you want to make the place visually appealing so that people actually want to be there. So let me show you in a couple of those 2 worlds that I was just talking about that I used for classes. I'm going to show you those from a different perspective and kind of show you how some of those elements are built in. So this is a really unusual view of the Lawson Lake Amphitheater model. You can see how the illusion with the background completely breaks down when you look at it from this angle. It only works when you're there in the space. But you can see in this figure that if we look in the lower right of the figure, there's a little viewing platform behind the stage, but then the stage is there. And then sloping away from the stage is some rocks, and like it slopes up towards the mountains to create a natural angled amphitheater for people to hang out. Formal seats don't work very well in VR. They make people fidget and agitated because you can't really sit down in VR. So you can just kind of have seats that people can kind of be in, if you know what I mean, like physically, like not physically because it's all digital, like right in the seat. It's weird. It's kind of creepy. So this kind of environment is starting to work a little bit better. You can see in this environment, in this whole thing's based on a square, as you can see. So in the upper right, there's some more viewing platforms. There's a bit of a forest back there behind the mountain that I've made. In the lower right, kind of in the front there, you can see a sort of a building, and that's a building that could be used to host basically student content. If we want to share it with the public, like we can create a copy of this world that would be publicly available. Because when it's a classroom, it's private, like I can have it so only the students can get in. But we can make a copy of it where people would spawn inside that pavilion building, and we could have student posters and things in there. But the people spawning in there might not be allowed out of that building, meaning they can't go into the rest of our learning space. So we can use it as sort of a demo area to show off the work that the students are doing. And then, of course, in the middle, I've built a mountain, and you can see in gray, there's sort of trails on the mountain, and on the backside, there's a little pond and things. And this is just an area for people to kind of hang out and explore and just relax and chat and just enjoy the scenery, just making it pleasant. This is that other one, the Maud Lake Pavilion, the one that will be for the research team that I work with. This one is interesting in that because you can see that it's a little more simple in terms of the textures that are being used and kind of the objects in the environment. And that's simply because, again, we're making it for the lowest common denominator. So all the headsets will work in it. So it will get approved for use in sort of these public events. And so it has the same basic layout, though. You've got a stage, you got, again, you can see some similar elements of viewing platform. On the left side, you can see the start of a pavilion. I'll show you another picture of that in a moment. On the right, there's a little bit of kind of mountains. You can kind of see, like, I built some rocks and there's some fire pits with like actual working fires going. So you can stand around the campfire and chat a little bit. So it's, again, the same basic elements built into this world. And then if you want to look inside the pavilion, this is sort of looking in that pavilion. And we're using the front part of this pavilion for our own promotional stuff. So we have our newsletter there on the left built onto cubes so people can walk around and read our bi-weekly newsletter. And we've got our mission statement and things there. And then that pavilion, you can't see from here, but on the left goes back into large rooms that could be used for hosting large-scale events. Like, let's say one of our user groups wants to host a poster conference for 20 students to show up posters. Well, we can host that for them. We can post the posters up and we can create an event for them in Altspace, and we can do all that. So this is an area that's going to be used to promote the research of the people that are part of our user group, basically. So that's the spaces, a little bit about the spaces. The last sort of main topic I want to talk to you about in this part here is managing the people and the space. So once we think about this idea that we want to present in VR, and then we want to present in Altspace, and then we've built our spaces, we have some sense of how to use the space now, we build it. I want to talk to you a little bit about what it's like in that experience when you're in there, what are some of the tools and so forth. So there are host tools in Altspace, things like speakers lists and megaphones that make it all so much more user-friendly, like actually usable as a real space. Talk a little bit about radial menus and emoticons and things about that experience, eye contact, audience feedback, and occasionally trolls. Though when I'm teaching my university class, everything will be private, so that won't really be a problem, but it is in some public events. Okay, so when we look at this slide, basically here is to show you briefly some of the event tools that are available in Altspace. So if you look in the smaller image on the lower left, that is the create an event window. So you can see there, you put your name and description of the event and start dates and so forth, whether it's public and private. And then let's say it's private, you could add a whitelist of people who would be allowed versus you can also have a blacklist, people who aren't allowed. You can just make the whole world public and anyone can come and go as they like. So you can customize it however you like. And then on where it says select a template there, that's sort of still the picture on the left, but the right side of the picture on the left. Those are the templates you can use. And if you were building in Unity, your Unity builds would show up there as templates. So you could build an event based off of the Unity build world that you created. So it would show up in your templates list. And then the bigger picture on the right is sort of that event creation screen, though I have to admit it's changed a bit since this is a little bit of an older one, but it's changed since then. It's been updated. At the top, you can see this week, all categories interested my events. That's basically allows you to, when you're just going through, you can look and search for events and look for events in categories. You can tag them as interested if you might want to go back later, that sort of thing. And then my events is where your events would show up, the ones that you've created that you're the host of. And so event creation is pretty simple now in Altspace. It's pretty straightforward. It doesn't take more than literally a few minutes to learn how to do it. Once you have an event up and running, you are then the host of that event. And so you've got a bunch of tools available to you. So when you're in that space, all of these windows that I show you, they show up just as floating menus around you. They're just kind of floating around you and you can click on them and use them. But when you're the host, like that, when the host panel comes up, you can see it, but nobody else in the room can see it other than people who also have host status. So you can assign people status in the room. They can be hosts, they can be moderators. There's different roles that they can have, which gives them different permissions, basically. So the host panel is what you would have as the host. And again, if you have somebody else helping you host, sometimes they might run these panels for you if you're working live with the audience. If you look at the smaller sort of vertical image on the left side of this, you've got access to the world editor, and then it shows like a list of the host tools. So when you click on that host tools button, the tall menu comes up above it, and you can mute yourself and you can give yourself the megaphone. So the megaphone takes away the idea of sound being proximal in that it immediately sounds, if I put the megaphone on and I'm the host, it immediately sounds like I'm talking right in your ear, regardless of where you are in the space. So it allows one person to have the ear of everybody else. Now that can be a problem, but I'll show you how that works really well. And then the bottom button there brings up the host panel. So that's the bigger picture you see on the right side. This allows you to see everybody that's in the space. So where it says guests, you can see every person that's in the space right now. You can mute them, you can kick them out, you can you can basically regulate the whole. You can see everybody that's in the space at all times, and you can access them. This is sometimes handy. Like you see, there's a little microphone symbol there, or a little speaker symbol, and then the little squares, they go up and down, shows you the levels of a microphone. It's really great if you're trying to find the person in the room whose dog is barking in the background and you just want to mute them so that everybody doesn't have to listen to their dog, that kind of a thing. So really these real practical tools that actually make it more useful in the space. And then another really cool feature of the host panel is the participation tab, which is not shown here, but basically what that is a speakers list. So I can activate a button that brings up a raise hand button for every user in the space. So if you look again back to the picture on the left, the smaller one, where it says World Editor Host Tools, a new little dot would pop up and it would be called raise hand. And if anybody in the audience clicks on that, in essence, what they're doing is putting themselves on the speakers list. And the speakers list shows up to me under participation. So I can go through and I can see exactly when they clicked in, how long they've been on the speakers list for. I can click on them. And so I can, if I'm doing a formal presentation like that, I can just mute the whole room so that I can just mute everybody's microphones so that we don't get all that background noise doing a more formal presentation. And then if someone asks a question during a more formal presentation, we can have that more formal style. Well, it's not that formal, but more structured style of question and answer, in that I can mute the whole room. Then I can hand them the megaphone, basically, and they accept the megaphone, and then everyone in the room can hear me and them talk, and they can ask their question, I can respond or whatever, and we can have as many people as we want with the megaphone. But basically the idea is it helps you just manage the room so everyone can hear, people aren't talking over top of each other. And it's these kinds of tools, which is one of the main reasons I selected Altspace, because these are the tools that actually make it practical to teach in a room like this. Okay, the next slide actually shows you another set of tools. These are the ones that the actual user has, any user has when they're in a space, including a host. And this is what we call the radial menu. So the big sort of teal triangle-y round menu thing in the very middle, that will bring up your master menu that allows you to jump to different spaces and, investigate worlds and all the rest of that. This is the rest of the icons around the outside are your sort of menu items for in there. So there's taking a picture, there's a space bubble. So if people come into your personal space, they kind of disappear. So it keeps people from touching you or sticking their hands in your face, that kind of stuff. The other one that's important that I'll just mention is there's that little emoticon there. And you'll see if you look in the picture, you can see above people's heads, there's clapping hands and hearts and things like that. So the way this works in Altspace is if you click on that little emoticon that's in your radial menu, it brings up another little small radial menu of other emoticons. And there are clapping hands, hearts, happy face, things like that. And when you click on those in a space, they appear above your head. They kind of float up and then just disappear above your head. And so it's a way of an audience member kind of saying, oh, that's kind of a cool point or something like that while a presentation is going on, even though their mics are muted. So you can get a little bit of feedback from the audience that way. You can see it's something when you're in Altspace, it's something that experienced users in Altspace use regularly, and inexperienced users it takes a while to get used to doing it, but it becomes almost automatic. Anyway, it's another great part of the interface in Altspace. Okay, so that's about the tools for setting up events. The last thing I want to talk about here is sort of that teaching experience in VR. What's it been like to actually teach in VR and have that experience? One of the challenges is eye contact. So you don't really, most of the time it's your avatars. The avatars in the audience are pretty stationary and they just kind of stand there. And there are times when you're presenting, you're like, is anybody out there? Is anybody hearing me? And so one of the things you can do is train your audience to provide feedback. So a lot of stopping and pausing and getting questions really works well in VR. 15 straight minutes of lecture doesn't work great in VR. Because you just lose everybody. They just drift off. They're looking at other menus. They have, they could have all kinds of things open, other browser windows, and be looking at things on the internet and you also have to train them to use the emoticons to provide that level of feedback for you. So it's pretty easy and it works pretty well. People often ask me about appropriate and inappropriate behavior in VR, what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, it's a very, very simple rule. Whatever behavior is inappropriate in the real world, it's inappropriate in Altspace. In the real world, you don't just walk up to someone you don't know and start touching them. You also don't do that in Altspace. It's not appropriate. You know, that feeling of personal space is there in Altspace as well. When you're in there in VR, you feel that sense of presence of people around you and you feel that personal space. So it's just an example, but that's basically the rule of thumb that Altspace uses as well. Whatever behavior is okay in the real world, that's what's okay in Altspace. So it's actually quite easy to communicate that to people. Every once in a while, we do have trolls that show up in our public events. Again, not a problem when you're doing a private event in a classroom. And you can boot them out. You can literally just boot them so that they're gone. It's quite quick and easy to do. You just click on them. As a host, I get a thing above their head, or my moderators do, and a button right there that's boot is one of them that we can hit and just kick them out right away. And they can't just come back in. They're banned from this event. So those are really helpful for big public events like that. We usually have moderators. So when one person's on the stage, we'll have 2 or 3 other people sort of monitoring. This has hardly ever happened. There's only twice it's happened in our public events with researchers in VR. And one was actually on Monday at our event on Monday. Some guy, he sort of participated in the conversation. He's like, I talked to him a little bit. Oh, what business, what do you work in? And he talked to me a little bit. And then just out of the blue, while everyone was having a conversation, he just flew up into the middle of the group and started saying, suck my, and I won't obviously continue from there. It took all of about 3 to 4 seconds for him to be gone. So we can manage this fairly well now. Okay, so that's sort of the teaching experience. You just have to do it. It's really not that hard. It's not that different. You're still just a teacher in front of the room, and basically all the same stuff applies once you get comfortable with the interface. So the last thing I'm going to talk about, and there's a lot I could talk about on this topic, but I'm not really going to dive too far into it. On a completely different shift of gears here, I've also this fall been using Altspace for flat screen teaching. So for my courses this fall, for one of my I started out with 2 courses, I switched to 1, but I've been using this exact setup that I've been talking to you about, but not for VR. So I go in VR, I set up a screen, like you can see in the 2 images there. That's some of the content from my courses. And I can talk about that as an avatar. I bring in a second avatar into the space, and I use the second avatar as basically my camera. So I point it at myself, and then I run that on a different computer. And on the different computer, you can do a screen capture. So what my second avatar, camera avatar, sees, I can capture it as a video. So then now I've got a flat screen video and I can post those up for my students. So I've been doing an hour or an hour and a half, teaching lesson in VR, and then posting that up as a YouTube, posting that up. Actually, I'm doing them in Google Drive, posting them to Google Drive, and then putting links up for my students. And so it's cool and it works. It's really time consuming. It's a lot of work to build these things. I started doing it for 2 classes. I had to drop it down to 1, but I am going to keep doing it. It's a really interesting idea, and it really opens up a lot of opportunities. So I'm not going to talk too much about that. If people want to talk to me about that later, they can contact me and the actual technical parts of how to do it and all the rest of that. I will show you, I don't know if this will work here. I'm assuming it will. I'm just going to play you a short little video from these videos that I've made for my classes. So this is from the Chapter 5 lecture from Sensation and Perception. This is just a 1-minute short video. Let me know if this doesn't work. I'm just going to assume it's working, so I'll play the video right now. One ambulance can constantly produce different patterns of light on your retina. How do you ever keep recognizing it as the same ambulance? How do you even recognize that it is an ambulance? If any one object like this one can project an infinite number of images on your retina, then how do you know that this is an ambulance? It never looks the same to you twice. So if I show it to you at almost any angle, you can tell that it's a cylinder. And that one, any of these. So this is view invariance. So regardless of which angle I show it to you at, you can tell that it's a cylinder. Right? If you move it around, you can tell that it's a cylinder. An accidental property is one of the few angles you can look at one of these geons and not be able to tell that it was a cylinder. So if I show it to you perfectly aligned like that, let's see if I can get it right, it might just look like a circle. So again, those are just a couple of quick clips I just grabbed from some of the content I'd created earlier this semester for my course. So that's what I've been trying to play around with, leveraging all of the things that I learned through the spring and the summer and trying to use them in a different way to teach these online courses this fall. Again, pros and cons. Oh, sorry. Pros and cons about that. Again, it's pretty time consuming, and but like I said, it's kind of cool. You can kind of do. You can see there, especially for a course in visual perception, to be able to roll around 3D models like that is actually really helpful. To talk about perceptual angles and all kinds of things can be pretty helpful in that format. Okay. So that's basically my talk for today. That's the gist of what I wanted to share with you guys. A little bit about what I've been doing in VR and about what it's like and where we are in the VR world right now in terms of using it as a teaching tool. Teaching and learning, basically the take-home points, teaching and learning in VR is already happening. It's not something happening in the future. I personally know like 100 people that teach in VR already. I'm just throwing out a number, but like a lot. There's whole groups like Educators in VR that are promoting it and supporting it. There's support groups for everyone that's doing it to help handle all the technology problems. And the platforms and tools get better every week. And, you know, it was funny when I wrote that sentence. I actually wrote it, the first time I wrote it, I wrote the platforms and tools get better every month. And I realized that's actually not as accurate as week. Like Altspace has updates every Tuesday. There's their platform updates, and most of them are noticeable. They're things that improve every week. So it is actually accurate to say every week. That shows you how much interest in development there is here. And the last comment there, this has a huge potential in education. It's a whole new way to have a form of distance learning, but with real sense of community and interaction. Because one of the problems that people always complain about distance learning is you don't feel like you're part of a class. You're just kind of alone on your own. And I can tell you honestly, VR does not have that experience. You go to these, when I go to these events in VR and I spend a couple hours in VR and I meet people I know in there and we chat and we have conversations, and that it feels like you take your VR headset off and it feels like you went somewhere. It feels like I left my house and I went to an event and now I've come back. It has that feel. It doesn't feel like you're just sitting in your basement forever, which a lot of us are starting to get used to in the COVID world, I think. So it really does take you out of that. I mean, it doesn't take much to envision a future where I could build a whole Mount Royal campus and just have students going to classes where they could walk around and, hey, why not take a roller coaster from one class to the other? You see, there's so much potential here in what you could do. And it is exploding in interest. So I think it's a great thing that we're moving into this at Mount Royal fairly early, trying to get this course going, and really exploring this avenue for students. Okay. And so then just my finishing slide. There's my title. There's me in the mountains, and there's my dog. So I'm open. Anybody has any questions, I'm more than happy to try to answer them. I think we got a little bit of time, but not much, a couple minutes, I guess.
Thanks, Tony. There are a couple questions in the chat that I'll share with you. Excuse me. One thing is that the link is expired to the Discord group. So if you could share a new link for that would be great.
Okay.
You could also share a couple of links to the courses, so Universe and the one run by Nick.
Yeah, that's all one thing. Universe is Nick. So it's that one actually, I believe is tryuniverse.com. I think I can just tell you that right now. I think it's one word, tryuniverse.com. And that's the link to his online course website, basically. That's the link to Universe's website, what he calls Universe.
Is there an easy way for people to search to find the updated Discord group?
Boy, I don't know. I can get the link for you. I don't know if I can get it right this moment, but I can certainly get it for you. I don't know why that one is outdated. I guess it's an older slide from a couple slides, only from like last month. So it's not like it's an ancient slide, but we probably have updated something.
If you could maybe share that with Anna, and then Anna will share that with the participants.
Great. Yeah.
Famira is wondering if you know or could recommend the best headset for students who are looking for a balance between quality and price. Right.
Hi, Famira. Famira and I go back. She was a former PSYC student back in the day. Yeah, in terms of headsets, they range, there's a pretty big range in price. The Oculus Go was a great headset that was very simple, and it was like $200. But Oculus has kind of canceled that now. So I still would go with the Oculus headsets. The Quest 2 is what's available now and is a fantastic headset, and is about, I'm trying to think of dollars here. I think it's about $369 or something along that price range. And that is a complete standalone headset. So you don't need a computer, you don't need anything else with it. It just works by itself, just standalone. Those range in price. The Quest 2 starts at around $3 something and goes up to, you can spend up to $600. I think I spent $600 and something on mine because I got all the add-ons and the biggest memory it has and all that kind of stuff. So those are probably the best device. I mean, there's a lot more expensive high-end devices that are connected to computers, but for the kind of stuff we're talking about, they're unnecessary. Like, you only really need that if you want hardcore gaming power, right? To play like high-resolution games, super high-resolution games and stuff. Even the Quest will do great games. So that's the device I like the most, is the Quest. Having no cords and having everything just wireless and standalone, you literally turn on a Quest, you press a couple buttons, you pop it on your head, and you're in VR in 10 seconds. It's super easy.
Thank you. There was a question from Rebecca, but she had to leave. So we'll jump ahead to Caroline's question. She's got two questions. What do you think is the biggest advantage and disadvantage with VR compared to traditional education? And her second question is, practically, do your students bring their own headsets, or do you have a class set of headsets to loan out, or any other solutions?
So two very good questions. Pros and cons. Actually, I'll start with the headset question first because it's easier. For the purposes of this course, we're going to have students buy their own headsets. So they can either have an existing headset, they already own one, or they will buy one for themselves. We're trading that off by promoting the idea that they don't have to buy a textbook, which will save a good chunk of the cost. Now, you can do that at the post-secondary level. I can ask a student to buy a headset. That's obviously not necessarily a solution that would work, say, for a grade 10 student. You can't necessarily say, oh, you have to go get a headset. You can certainly rent them out. That's an option too, but then there's all the challenges that go with that, in terms of deposits and things getting damaged and, so that's what we're doing, is we're having people purchase their own headsets. The other part of the question, pros and cons for VR versus conventional classroom. I would say there's a lot of positives in that, the flexibility. Like, even when I was talking earlier about the idea of talking to your students in a more conventional sort of screen in the back, and you're talking to them, but then the idea of being able to get up and just go somewhere and move to different places and move into small groups. Like I said, imagine like, oh, go over to the other part of the map, and over there I've got, say, some research papers, and they're big. Like, I mean, they're talking like 7 meters by 5 meters wide. So people can just stand around in a group and just read them. And they can read some of these papers and they can have discussions. I mean, the flexibility, I can bring in models. So if I'm talking about the eye, I can bring in a giant 3D model of the eye and fly around in it. Evelyn, who runs our Researchers in VR group, she recently did a presentation in virtual reality about headset hygiene. So how to clean them. In a world of COVID-19, how do we clean them if we're going to use them from one person to the other? And she brought a giant model of a Oculus Quest VR headset onto the stage that she could literally go inside and point to the different spots on it and things like that. So there's that flexibility. The downside right now, I say the weakest points would be that interaction part, in the sense of like, it's weird when you're on stage that you can't, for those of you out there who have spent a lot of time teaching on stages, you can read the audience by like looking at eye contact, see who's looking at you, and you can you don't have that in VR. It's kind of gone. The new avatars are great in that their eyes start to react to sound. So even if the avatar's looking, say, a little to the left, if I start talking, their eyes will turn and orient towards where the sound is coming from. And that makes it actually a little bit more natural. And so this stuff is coming along, but some of that stuff is a little bit awkward. And then, of course, there's the learning curve part. Like, to get up to speed to do all this does take a bit of commitment of time and energy. If you use just basic templates and stuff, it's not that bad. If you're talking about diving into Unity and learning all of that, obviously that's a much bigger task. So that's not very short. That was a moderate answer to the questions.
That's all we have for questions in the chat. Back to you, Anna.
Great. Do we have any other questions from audience who would like to ask Tony a question directly? And if so, you can feel free to unmute yourselves. No?
Just one thing. Can I just One comment, thank you for bringing up the virtual reality graduation thing. I received my master's degree from a postman. So
Oh, Amira.
awkward. Yeah, it was awkward, but the feeling that I got when I saw somebody graduating on a virtual stage was much, much more fulfilling. So that was
Actually,
great.
yeah, it was great, Famira. And I can comment on that a little, because at first when I walked in the room and we were going to have a graduation day, I walked into the room thinking this is just going to be a silly waste of my time. You know, this is just filler, right? This isn't really course content. But it wasn't. Everyone agreed that was a real great experience. We got to share this experience of all being there and getting our graduations. We all walked across the stage just like graduates, and we each got our certificates. It was great. It was really a good experience.
Yeah, what a different feeling from the empty, like the high five to the postman. So
Right. Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
I had one other question. It's more research based. I know this was a talk on practical application, but I'm just wondering, can I connect with you on the psychology of robot interactions? Because I'm working on a research project around
Of
that.
course, Famira. Anytime. You know how to get a hold of me, so no worries.
Thank you.
Great. I see we have, well, now we have quite a few questions.
Feel free. I'm in no rush, so as long as people want to stay, I'm more than happy to answer questions.
And we'll be recording as well. So if you do have to go, you can type your question into the chat and we can record Tony's answer and upload it onto YouTube. So Lynn, I see that you're unmuted. Do you have a question?
Yeah, thanks. I do. I was really happy to see you could bring in the 360 images and use that as your sky. Is that pretty straightforward to be able to do that?
Yeah, it actually is. If you're familiar with the 360 cameras, that's a separate thing altogether. But once you have a 360 picture, you literally, there's a section called Skyboxes, My Skyboxes, and you click and you go create a new skybox, and then it asks you where you want to upload. You just upload your file, it goes in, and then when you click on Skyboxes, it shows it as a 360 image in your skybox. It's literally super simple. Now, there's a lot more I would like to do with those that is still a little limiting. I would like to do even more with them, but it's all coming, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. And I just wanted to ask you about, we're getting new LiDAR models, right? 3D models with the iPhone 12 Pro Max, and any way of bringing those in that you know of yet?
Yeah, you can bring in lots of models. So, I mean, I didn't dive into it because it's obviously a little bit more complicated, but if you get to the level where you're using Unity, you can use Unity to create kits. So within Altspace, there's already, in the Altspace World Builder, there's thousands of models. You can use a stick, a tree, a car, like all kinds of things to use to build things. But you can also bring in your own kits. So anything that can be scanned and brought into Unity. And then in Unity, you can package those up as a kit that you can upload into Altspace and then use those as objects in Altspace, or you can just build them right into the build right at the Unity level. So it's almost like two tiers of building. You build at Unity, and then you can build almost a layer on top of that in Altspace.
Yeah, super. Great. Thank you.
Great. Kathy, I see you have your hand up. Would you like to go next?
Sure. Guess my question was, so if you're brand new to it and you're getting your first headset and you want to explore, what would you say to get to the point where you're confident and comfortable having people come into a space and to be able to navigate and move around the space? What would you say is like the hardest part of getting started, or what some of the pitfalls maybe to watch out for would be?
Yeah, so I would say to start is pretty simple. Go into Altspace, start an account, make your avatar, and just start going to events. There's events every day. There's tons of events today alone. Most of them won't appeal to you, but some will. There's everything from one of the people I work with, who's another faculty member at Mount Royal. She loves the Altspace meditation events. So there's a lot of public spaces where people go to meditate together. There's events for all different types of people. There's a stand-up comedy club that I go to sometimes on Fridays and Saturday nights and watch live comedians. So the very first thing you want to do is just go to events. That's where you get a feel for kind of how they run, how they're used, how you interact with other people, and basically just get comfortable being in VR, because that's the first thing. That I think is actually the biggest obstacle, is people getting comfortable being in VR. Because at first, even me, when I started to get into it, you know how it is. You put the VR headset on, and then even if there's no one in the room, you still somehow feel weird, like as if someone could see you. You'd be weird, and you're waving your arms around in this space with this head thing on, and like, do you know what I mean? Like, it takes a while till all of that kind of slips out of your mind, and then you're just experiencing the virtual space. You're just in it. And then once you're present, I mean, mentally present in that virtual space, a lot of that other stuff, that other baggage kind of goes away, and you just start to feel comfortable in it. So I would say that the biggest problem and the solution is actually pretty easy. The biggest problem is getting people comfortable in VR first. And the biggest solution is just spend time in it. Just go to Altspace events. And then everything else after that is pretty straightforward. Like for, let's say you want to learn world building in the World Builder, you want to learn how to interact in VR. There's all kinds of Educators in VR runs live free events throughout every week on how to interact in VR, how to create an event in VR, how to so they have all these free seminars running every week on, say, how to create an event. So it's super easy to learn. Plus they have, documents you can go to and you can read it offline and all that kind of stuff. So
then that makes me wonder, how will you be preparing your students if they are coming in and they're going to do this class? Are you assuming that they have some VR experience before they get there? Or how will you be, I guess, quote unquote, orienting them to the virtual space?
Yeah, that's
like a big hurdle.
Absolutely.
How are you going to approach that?
Yeah, so great question. So this is something I haven't mentioned, and this is I should have actually said this at the beginning. So full disclosure, Anna, who's part of our group here, is actually part of a group that I have put together for addressing questions just like that. So myself and Anna and a couple other people at Mount Royal, another faculty member, another person who works in the library, we have been working together since last spring to tackle some of these issues. So we're talking about some orientation events for them at the beginning, just in terms of telling them what they have to do to get set up. And then I'll be communicating with the students, and I'll create an initial event that I will send to all of their avatars that they can just come to the event. And then from that point on, once I have them in an event with me, then I can teach them everything else. Like day one is going to be all just orientation, teaching them the interface, teaching them about the learning space, teaching them the expectations of behavior in that environment. So yeah, you have to realize that if you're going to do this, there's going to be some orientation time. And then Anna has taken on roles like maybe potentially, like we're talking about it at this point, but potentially maybe making some short YouTube videos that would be instructional for them. And I don't know if Anna wants to speak about that or anything like that, but that would help them get started before I even can get a hold of them in Altspace, if you know what I mean. And so, yeah, I've already been in my head working through the actual set of procedures step by step as to how we will be contacting the students and getting them into the course. Once they're in the course, then it's easy. Then they'll have a persistent world that they'll have favorited and they can go to it at any time. That's fine. It's just the setup will take a little bit. You're absolutely right. It's an important part. And that's why we put a committee together to kind of really brainstorm all of this and think through it.
Okay, that's good to hear, because it sounds like there's a bit of upfront work before you dive in. Yeah,
absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that a little bit. So also one benefit is at Mount Royal, we do have a physical space in the library called the Experience Lab. And within that space, we have a variety of headsets, access to development laptops, and access to Altspace accounts that students would be able to come in, try out different headsets, can actually talk to a member of our team one-on-one if they have specific questions about getting set up on Altspace, or if they're having any technical troubles. And then also if, like, let's say their headset wasn't working and they needed one, they had to borrow one for a couple weeks until they could figure out an issue, they can borrow some from the Experience Lab as well. So we do have kind of those options set up for students before and during the course as well to support them.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Thanks, Kathy. Good question.
Yeah,
Sorry.
No, that's all right. All right, so I think we have answered all of our audience questions for today. And Tony, thank you so much again for joining us and sharing all of your wisdom with us as well, and just sharing your journey so far, utilizing these applications and really your experience in VR. I know for a lot of people on campus and community members, this is extremely valuable information. So also, Tony, would you mind if I share your email address if people would like to get in contact with you?
No problem, of course.
Wonderful. So I'm just going to go ahead and I have shared that in the chat. So if you would like to email Tony, ask him any questions, please feel free to do so. And as we mentioned, this video will be available on our YouTube channel. Carrie has shared a link to that at the top. And without further ado, thank you so much, Tony.
Oh, thank you, guys. Thanks. I hope it was informative.
Very, absolutely.
My wife asked, I'll finish off with this. My wife asked me if I had anything interesting to say in my talk when I was telling her about this. I said, well, I've got stuff to say. I guess it's somebody else's decision whether it was interesting or not.
I love that.
We'll see in the chat that people thought it was interesting.
Thanks,
Many
guys.
thanks.